Western Mass News.
Western Mass News getting answers as mass shootings across the country continue to make headlines. Two of them happening yesterday. Thanks for joining us, everyone, on this Thursday. Welcome to Western Mass News at 5. I'm Chris Pisano. While these deadly shootings have been happening in other states, that doesn't stop local law enforcement from fearing we could be next. Western Mass News reporter Paris Dunford joining us live in studio after speaking with one local police department. Paris.
Chris, the West Springfield Police Department tells us they train for the day a mass shooting comes to Massachusetts, but pray it never does.
You start to wonder, when is it coming here?
258. That's the number of people who have lost their lives in mass shootings across the country just in 2023 alone. 194 mass shootings have taken place since January 1st of this year, and we aren't even halfway through. That means at least 4 people have been injured in each of those events to qualify as a mass shooting. Just Wednesday alone, there were 2 mass shootings in different parts of the country. One in Chicago, where 4 people were injured, and one in Atlanta, with 1 person killed and 4 others injured. And those numbers don't tally the countless number of people who lost their lives to gun violence outside of this. Western Mass News sitting down with Sergeant Joseph LaFrance with the West Springfield Police Department to talk about the impact.
This seems to be getting worse and worse every day. There's a mass shooting in the country. It seems like weekly, daily. There's shootings locally. So it's just becoming out of control.
We asked Sergeant LaFrance how these almost daily shootings are affecting people.
I think people are becoming desensitized to this kind of violence because you either become desensitized or you become frozen with fear and you stay home. So people are, I think, used to seeing it and just going about their daily routine.
We asked him if he believes police officers are now becoming desensitized to this type of news.
I'm not seeing that, no. I mean, officers are clearly aware of the gun violence going on in this country and in the area, but I'm not seeing that with them, no.
And LaFrance says officers seem to be more alert and aware of what could happen on each call, but he says that's why they've increased their training, so they are prepared. Reporting live in studio, Paris Dunford for Western Mass News.